Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Choose to Be podcast. And we have our favorite guest, Luke Gordon, joining us today. So, we've just covered 2 weeks worth of myths around betrayal trauma. And Alana, I don't know about you, but I've already heard a lot of good feedback from those episodes and how it's just helping clarify and validate so many of these myths and experiences for you listeners. We also know that we have a lot of male listeners who are the ones who have betrayed. So we're going to talk about the myths around sexual addiction today. And so you're going to hear a lot from Luke, who, as always, just gives such great perspective. And I'm using the word that you just described in some of our bullet points, like a lot of meat here, a lot of good content that we have to share today. So we probably are going to have to split this one into as well. So we'll get as far as we can with these different myths. But one that we wanted to start with that I think could take us off a little episode, which we'll try to rein it in a little bit. And let me just disclaim, like I did before, Alana, in their first one, is these are not going to be all encompassing. These are not all the myths. And because for time purposes, you all are not going to get all the information around every single myth. We're going to do our best to hit the hot spots. I think for the three of us who work with so many clients, we're going to try and tackle some of these that we hear the most often and some of those stuck points that we can get stuck in the myth. So that's what we're going to try and tackle today. But this first one, Luke, the myths around sobriety and recovery. The myth of sobriety is just not acting out. Like, I'm sober because I didn't act out. Why is that a myth, according to Luke?
Yeah, according to me, right? Just me. You look at root, and I know this is one of the other myths that we'll be addressing, but if you look at the root, sobriety is not just acting out. I just, I was just reading the other bullet point. Holy crap. I wasn't even thinking about that one. I was going to sexual addiction be cured by abstaining from sex. So I'm just got thrown off.
Well, it's funny because can I jump in here for a sec?
Yeah.
Um, I thought at first we did a typo because I'm reading it and it says sobriety is not just acting out. So my brain's, wait, sobriety is not recovery, which is what we covered in the last one. But then I was like, oh, I get what Amie, you were writing with this one. Sobriety is not just acting out because sobriety, yes, we can get rid of the cheating, or yes, we can get rid of the porn, or whatever the problematic behavior that's happening between or happening with that person and in the relationship. But so often we get rid of that. And those are acting out behaviors, but we have all of these, what we call acting in behaviors. These behaviors that are the stuff that's happening internally within you that are still coming out, the emotional abuse, the lying, the hiding, the deceiving, the fantasizing, the shutting out your partner, the defending, the minimizing, the justifying, like all of those acting and behavior. So it's funny, Luke, because you looking at the next one was really good because my brain was still getting caught up on this one and why this is so big. So yeah, I hope that bought you time to get caught up on this one because Amie, I love where you started this because we didn't cover this one in the betrayal one. And
We
this is
talked, we talked about how there's a difference between recovery and sobriety. But
right.
yeah, we hear this a lot, right? Like, well, I'm not doing it anymore. So what's your problem?
Alana, can you take a moment and talk about acting in versus acting out? Because I'm hearing that a lot. And I want for the men specifically here to, so when you say acting in, what do you mean by that?
Acting in means all of those other pieces that are not those behaviors that are happening outside of you. It's the things internally and emotionally that are happening inside of you still comes out because everything that happens internally, whatever we don't say out, we act out. So it is all of those other emotional pieces that still come out, the minimizing, justifying, deceiving, lying, hiding, fantasizing. Those are all the acting and behaviors. So people think they're sober. I'm not doing the cheating on you. I'm not compulsively looking at pornography. I'm not whatever it is. I'm not going to strip clubs anymore. Why aren't you happy? But I'm still pushing you away emotionally. I'm still shutting you out. I'm still hiding. I'm still deceiving. I'm still self protecting all of the time. So, yeah, you stop the acting out behaviors, but all those acting in behaviors, if we're not working through those,
Yeah.
we're still not working recovery.
Wasn't
Well,
this
getting
the white knuckling, right? This is what we've referred to as white knuckling. You're just gonna like holding on because what you said, Alana, all the stuff is still stirring and you're just resisting and not doing the behavior, but that's not sustainable.
getting sober doesn't fix anything, and I'll define sobriety as, like, not acting out. Behavior that I said I wasn't going to do, I'm not doing that anymore. That doesn't fix anything. That doesn't address anything root cause related. It just creates exposure to what the problem actually is. There's that phrase that I love, which is porn isn't my problem, it's the solution to my problem. The problem is blank. I don't know how to deal with rejection. I don't know how to deal with loneliness. I don't know how to deal with overwhelm, fatigue, whatever it is. That just exposes when I'm no longer using my drug of choice and you pick it, then I have a sober, emotionally present, emotionally aware view of what's actually going on. And that's a painful and really important place to be to get to work.
I see a lot where people try to go really fast through this period too. Like getting sobriety is really hard and it's challenging. And then they get to that place of uncomfortability. We take away the baby blanket, we take away the pacifier, or those the comfort that the addiction can give, or the numbing out that the addiction can give, or the acting out behaviors gave. And then we're left with the painful emotional pieces. And then that pain, like our brain is so hardwired to get out of pain. And
Mhm.
so I see a lot of people try to then fast forward this part of I gotta get out of the pain. I gotta get out of the pain. And this right here is where the real recovery work is.
Yeah. And I think about there's guys that are really turned off by the word sober, maybe because they've had somebody that's drug, alcohol, other types of chemical dependencies or substance dependencies. And I go, hey, totally. I understand why you're distracted by the word sober, but let's think about a sober person that just detox from alcohol or some other type of substance. And what would you describe someone that just got through the detoxing process? They're aware and uncomfortable. And I don't know, we talk about and we describe that person. And it reminds me of my part of the journey of leaning into, I can specifically think one of the most painful things I would use pornography to cope with was loneliness. And when I wouldn't use it and I would sit with myself and I would just be present with those emotions and feelings, that was really intense and very sobering.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just not about acting out.
It's like the awareness, right? All the awareness of the reality around what's going on inside of you and around you comes up to the surface. And yeah, anyways, I don't want to go off, but like every single one of us humans are practicing to be aware and sober of what is going on in and around us because there's so many different types of behaviors that we as humans use to numb that out. So I think this is why sobriety is the place to start because you have to start with that awareness. But it isn't just about stopping the behavior. So I think really we can move on to the next myth here because that one just I think is a great place to start because I see that get thrown out a lot. I'm not doing the behavior. Now, this next one, look, where your brain wanted to start, the myth.
Yeah, I'm so ready to go there. So ready to
Okay.
go there.
The myth is sexual addiction can be cured by simply abstaining from sex.
And we've been talking about it. It's cool because if I abstain from something, then I am sober minded. I'm aware of it. So it doesn't fix anything. It gives me a lens to look through to see what I'm experiencing differently. So, yeah, sexual addiction can't be cured by simply abstaining from sex. So, or whatever it is that I'm abstaining from, it creates awareness for me to be able to tackle that. So, if I'm not using, it doesn't mean anything is just automatically better. It just means I know what to be addressing and I know what to be tackling.
It it's interesting because a lot of sex therapists have a hard time with this concept of sex addiction because there is this fear that if people are treating sex addiction and then looking at it as bad, like that we'll start labeling sex as bad and sexuality as bad. And that's not actually at all what the CSAT community preaches or teaches. They actually do teach the healthy sexuality, but that's a fear of traditional sex therapists is that there will be this idea that we pendulum swing over here and then we say no sex is bad, avoid it. When in reality, real recovery is learning how to have a healthy sexual relationship with your own sexuality and how to embrace sexuality and how to have healthier coping mechanisms and how to stop taking non sexual issues and solving them with sexual coping mechanisms. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
abstaining from sex does not fix the problem. It just creates a whole new problem.
Yeah.
Your brain went to where mine went. Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
No, go ahead, Amy. I have something to say, but I'll wait for you to be done.
It was just like I went to parts work. The sexual behavior, the act is just used to manage a wounded part. And so I love what you said there, Alana. It's like, yes, when you are developing healthy and connecting to your healthy sexuality, it is an experience that you're having. And when we're talking about with your partner, you're having a relationship with your partner in the behavior, but there's no relationship with addiction to it. There's no healthy relationship. It's the behavior is used to manage another part of you that you're trying to keep down. This is that emotional part that we're talking about, the emotional wounding. Like Luke, you were saying, like I had to sit and be with alone. That's the wound. And if we don't want to sit with alone, then the behavior is what squashes that down.
Mhm. I'm reminded of a sex fast as a modality or practice for this part, which is I take sex out of the equation, I pull it all the way out, and I let there be a period of time, and then I get a reset, and then I bring it back in. Yeah, so just abstaining it and treating it as bad doesn't heal my relationship with that thing. So embracing how I see sex, understanding it, how it impacts me, what my sexual response is, it's really important. So it's not keeping it out forever. It's by um, creating awareness around what I'm experiencing and not having it be all tied to shame.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything around this one? Because right underneath that is the myth that if kind of the opposite, if my partner would just have more sex, or if I would could have more sex, then my partner would be more available, then I wouldn't need maybe it so much, or I wouldn't need to go somewhere else and get it. When you talk about how that is a big, huge myth.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say that, I mean, like, let's acknowledge that that makes sense. I'm trying to make it so we feel less crazy, or listeners do, of going, instead of just casting aside saying, of course, that's stupid. Like, why would more sex solve it, or my partner not giving that more? It makes so much sense in those moments why, if more would make it better, if my brain has the appetite for that. And then recognizing that it's once you come out of that, realizing it's not about more sex, it's about how sex makes me feel. Sex comforts me. It makes me feel like I'm going to be okay using those things. It's not about the healthy parts about sex. It's not about connection. It's not about intimacy. It's not about consent. It's just about feeling good. And I can't feel good. There's not, in addiction, that's a hole that's bottomless. There's nothing I can get to get more of that. So I just have to have a better relationship with it. If my partner would just be more open to more sex, or be more open to what kind of sex we have, then it would be better. No, because it's an empty hole. You can't fill that. Sex not being used in the right way.
This kind of goes along with one that I don't know if we were going to get to, but it was sexual addiction myth. Sexual addiction is about just having a high sex drive.
Mm,
And so I
mhm.
think this is a really good one to pull in here because It's not the same as having a high libido. It's characterized by compulsive behavior, a preoccupation with sexual activities, and an ability to control these impulses despite harmful consequences. So there's a difference because having a high sex drive can be part of a healthy sexual life, but sexual addiction comes with all the negative consequences, and we keep going despite those and we keep pushing. And so, like you said, look, there's this empty hole and it's an emotional hole that we can never fill. So even if you're being intimate or having sexual activities all throughout the day, those aren't filling that emotional hole.
Yeah. And it just reminds me of the other myth that I don't think we have listed on here, that men have a higher sex drive than women do,
Mm,
um, which is just really tied into it's being used differently. If you can't get enough of something, you're going to keep going back to it more and more. And you get a really, really healthy relationship with sex inside of that relationship. It's not uncommon for women to be that more high desire partner when they feel safe,
Yeah.
when they're not feeling used. Yeah, when they're not feeling used.
When they feel safe and their body feels safe, it is amazing the difference that I see in women's drives.
Mhm.
that's a hard one for a lot of women that I have worked with when that comes up. It's hard to believe that. I wanna validate our betrayed partners who might be listening to that. I know that was hard for me to believe. I thought there's so many parts of me were shut down. I think sometimes we also don't take into consideration the impact of PTSD and trauma on your physical body. And so there's so many factors to that, but I love what you said there, Luke, because I think that stigma, that stereotype does get thrown out and even weaponized. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen too. If you would just go do something about your sex drive, then, you wouldn't be so bored by this and you would give more and then I wouldn't do the things that I do. So I like that you brought that up.
I guess the invitation is if you feel for the person that did the betraying, if you feel like that your partner could be more sexual and be helpful, recognizing that the lower desire comes from a place of lack of safety.
Okay, so Luke, question for you. I've seen this come up with multiple men who get frustrated with their sex drive. And it feels like their sex drive, really, it's they're acting out, but they will say things like, I just want to cut off my penis, or I just wish I didn't have a sex drive, or I just wish sex weren't even an option. They want to just get rid of it because there is so much pain and compulsion and frustration attached to that. Can you just speak to that piece of it? Because I, I want to be sensitive to our betrayed partners, but I also think that there is, for those who have experienced their partner or spouse talking like this, it is confusing.
Yeah, there's 35 different ways to go about this conversation. So I'll attempt one, which is, yeah, I view my sexuality as a problem. Like if I just get rid of that, everything will be okay. That's what's causing all the problems. So there's an intense dislike for a very intimate part of self. I hate this part. This part is problematic and I don't want it. And you can only imagine a child as a part of a family that was hated and disliked. And how do you think they would behave?
Mm,
Right?
mm,
How do you think that they would survive? And that's what I see in them and myself is I just hate this part of me. And how does that part respond? It responds like a part that was hated, right? Learning to have less shame and I just want to apologize to the betrayed partner because of the trigger that can be attached to this because I'm giving compassion to the betrayer and I recognize so much hurt can come in that. I guess I'm sorry for the pain attached to this. But until that person learns to love parts of them that have been really destructive in nature and the origin of that, it's something they're going to continue to hate, continue to loathe, and it's going to continue to be destructive. So, anyway, that's what comes to mind.
And it's interesting. I remember one time being in supervision about this topic, and it came up, and the supervisor was betrayal trauma sensitive and said this very sensitively. But at the same time, I was like, oh, that's a hard truth. A lot of times, betrayed partners have a lot of pain around this part. And so they attack that part too. And so it's coming internally from the betrayer, it's coming externally from the person who has been hurt. And so there is a whole lot of attacking going on this part. And I'm not saying betrayed partners need to hold space or have empathy for this part, but having understanding and awareness of what's happening, I think is really important.
I can help here because what the experience is I don't want it like I had some control and I could tell the betrayed what to do, but I don't want you to show up in a way where you exercise like caretaking of him and his stuff. But I would love you to be in a spot where you can watch from a distance and not feel responsible for that.
Yeah, I think that I can speak to me. There have been times in my recovery where I was in so much pain. I would say things like, I just want to cut off your penis. I hate this part of you. If you would just never be a sexual person again, my life would be so much easier. Like I would be saying these things to you and telling you, I hate these parts of you. I've had clients who are saying, like, yeah, that little boy who's hurt inside of him, that little boy is the reason I'm hurt today. So I hate him. Like, I've been there. And as I have healed, I realize that me doing that is not actually helping either of us. It's not getting me to where I want to get in my healing. It's keeping me stuck because I'm focused on you and everything you're doing and not doing. It's also, unfortunately, impacting you and hurting you. And when I was really hurt, I wanted to hurt you. And I'm glad that I was able to heal and move out of that space because I don't want to hurt anyone that's not in my value system. So then I got to this place where I can respect that this is work that you need to do. I can't heal your inner parts. I can't heal your childhood wounds. What I can do, like you said, is I can give you room and space to do that work, but I don't need to come in and attack those parts of you.
Yeah.
I can see those as wounded parts. I can see those as parts that have injured me and can continue to injure me if they're not healed. And that's yours to work through.
Very beautifully said.
Yeah, I
So,
like we'll just talk that through. And to our betray partner listeners, as always, take this as information around how we heal and take that and then you go and then you watch. Okay. But take it as information and you're going to use that information to watch your partner and see what he does with that. So I love how you both talked through that. It was
And
beautiful.
I think one of the things that scared me along the way is I would align with Alana with that. She'd be like, "Well, I don't want you to be sexual anymore. Like your sexuality just hurts us, whatever it is." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's true, and I want it to die too." And then what I do is I recognize I go through this journey that's not actually what's going to be helpful. That it's okay to evolve in that journey of sitting there and aligning in that, but then recognizing that belief I have about myself, my sexuality is bad. Letting that evolve and turn something else it's really makes sense in the journey.
which is why this education is so important.
Oh my gosh, it's so important. It never stops. And I know we're like really honing in on this, but I just thought of one other little tidbit here. So Luke, tell me if you have thoughts on this, but this is a little further down the road in recovery. So when couples are in phase 3, we'll call it like they're reintegrating. So now we've done the disclosure, we've done some grieving together. We're in couple reintegration and we're reintegrating into a new sexual experience. One thing that and why I think what we're all talking about here is so important is that how you as an addict define your sexuality and your value system around it and dig underneath, like where did your value system begin with around sexuality, right? Because if we can't dig into that, then you can't reintegrate and create a whole new relationship. Because I've seen so many times with couples where he is trying still so hard not to injure and shut that down and not be sexual and Yet we're at beautiful phase 3 where there's safety, there's stabilization, we've agreed, we've got honesty, empathy, all the things. And this is actually the time where the couple and individually need to lean into their beautiful sexuality as a sexual being. So I think too, just for those that are further along and are trying to figure out how to reintegrate that, if you're still finding yourself, I would say I'm speaking to the addict, if you're still finding yourself trying to shut that off, or you have maybe some old value systems around your sexuality, then I would just highly recommend and suggest going back with your professional and getting some more clarity around what's underneath that. Because at some point, we do want to embrace this beautiful part of us and create something totally new. Where I think sometimes I've seen just still some white knuckling going on with as an addict. I just don't want to go back to that behavior. I just don't want to go back to that behavior. And so they want to hold on to this part that they hate that we've
Mm.
been talking about
Yeah, it
because
makes
they want to keep that part around a little bit just in case, because I don't want to go off the rails again. So I don't know if you have anything to say to that, but that came to mind too.
yeah. We just did a podcast on Beyond the Facade with Gene. He's a newer coach to us, and he did lust, roots, and trauma. And he
Mm,
talks about it all having a story. And he talked about, and I picture the guy that shuts that down his sexuality as soon as stuff comes out. He never understands where his story began and why it started showing up and how it was helpful to begin with. So
good
yeah,
reference.
it's important. And if you listen to Gene's story, he's so brave and vulnerable because he shares the specifics around lust for him
Mm,
and the stuff that I'm like, good for you, dude. Go. Because you can tell he's done his work to understand his sexual response and what specifically held power for him.
mm,
And oh my gosh, if he just would have shut down his sexual response, I can't imagine where he'd be at today. But because he seeked to understand it, really what's it tied into, some really beautiful stuff happened. That's what I'm reminded of listening to you talk about this, Amy.
yeah.
I'll just put a plug in here too that while it looks different, betrayed partners often need to do this exact same work of exploring their roots and their sexuality, the messages they got, which messages were helpful, which messages were not. Both partners doing this work together and separately. And that's so much of this journey. It looks different depending on which side we're coming from, but so much of this work actually parallels each other.
It really does. The principles are the same. That's what I always find.
Can I tell you what pisses me off?
Okay.
You're like, what are you talking about? What pisses me off is if I really engage in sex and really search it, like I have to deal with so much insecurity. I have to deal with so much of my actual real self and going, what am I experiencing? And if I keep those old patterns of sex in place, I miss out on so much growth, so much opportunity for learning about self. And I just think about two people understanding themselves sexually and all the things that have got them to today, and then possibly being able to share that with each other and be aware of that with each other when appropriate. That's intimacy right there. Holy crap.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk.
Can I do one more plug? So sorry. If you're in the first year of recovery, you're probably not in phase 3. Can I just
Oh,
put that out there?
thank
Because
you.
the
No.
amount of people who really like they'll hear phase 3 work and they're like, that's okay, that's where I want to be. That's where I'm at. There's so many foundations that come with phase 1 of the safety and stabilization. So many pieces of the grieving and mourning for both. And then we're really getting into that rebuilding and post traumatic growth.
Wait, was there a certain part that what made you can you tell me what happened there, Alana?
And I just see so often, like, people will hear this part of the podcast and then they'll go, that's where I want to be. So they're like, I heard Alana and Amy, I heard you guys talking about really creating this deep level of intimacy. So we're doing it. We're going to dive into this work. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, this work is wonderful. But if we don't have these other foundational pieces, This will be a big train wreck with a huge fire and an explosion. We need to make sure we're taking the steps and getting our foundation in place so this can be wonderful, beautiful, rewarding work.
Yeah, and that's where I love you work with a professional and you say, "Hey, I heard this a podcast. Can we process through it and talk about where I'm at in this journey?" Instead of just assuming you wanna go, yeah.
Which is why it leads to the next myth, and we'll probably end with this one because of the time we've taken, but this goes along with if I'm nicer and I help out more, and so my partner should just see that I'm trying harder, therefore recovered or good, and good enough to have sex with, I might add. I've heard that and seen that too. So this behavior of I'm just gonna be nicer and do more to help out is not an indication that the addict is in recovery or that is actually even safe for you to just drop all boundaries and jump right in like Alana, you're saying phase 3.
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally. It's scary to watch from my side because what his brain does is if sex is the most important thing, it's my most important need, I will show up in whatever way I need to get it, right? So, just basically she shows up and I'm not even saying it's, like, completely conscious. I'll get
Mhm.
my needs met and sex is my need, so I'll show up, which could be very much, look like, healthy living in healthy ways, which is like serving, attending to somebody else, empathy. And I had to check myself all the time. Like, why am I being nice? Why am I being kind? And I don't want to look at that crap because if I do, then I'm like, oh, I don't like my motivation.
Well, and I would say if the motivation is to get sex or get what you want, it's not kind. It is nice. And so that's where a lot of our betrayed partners get confused is that it feels kind, but it really is it's a coercion, right? If I'm doing these things for you, then you're going to do this for me. There's an underlining expectation I see oftentimes with that nice help out more behavior. And it can feel so freaking confusing to the betrayed partner when you are seeing a little bit of change. It's different.
So I might be going a different direction, but to different isn't change. It might just be different. I'm thinking him just showing up and all of a sudden being nice doesn't mean he's changed.
Thank
Just means
you.
he's being different.
Thank
So, and
And what
how do
I
you
make you say that again, because for betrayed partners, it is we often so bad and want there to be change that betrayed partners clump those together all the time. It's
Mhm, mhm,
different, so he must be changing, or it's different, so they must be changing. Different is not change.
mhm.
Different is different. It feels different, but that does not just equal change.
you're just hanging on there with a hope going, "This different, it's gotta matter this time, right? Gotta matter." And the really crappy words behind it are, "It's change if it's been there for a long time and it's consistent, and it's something about it." That's the part to watch for.
One of my most popular TikToks is I did a video around acts of service don't heal emotional wounds. And there was such a response to that, good and bad, that individuals are like, but I'm doing all these things. Why aren't they happy? And then those are being like, yes, thank you. But I will say that can be confusing to somebody where it's like, well, my partner said they wanted this and this and this and this, and I'm doing all of these things now. And that may be true that you're doing all of the things, but that will never heal emotional wounds. That those are two different types of work.
It is, and I remember as soon as you said that, I remember actually being confused about this. So, before I knew what was really happening, what my ex was actually doing behind my back, without that full reality, what I did believe at the time would help the relationship is if he helped out with kids, if he did the dishes, if he helped with dinner, if he went grocery shopping, if he would just sit in the kitchen and watch me cook, if he would do this. Like those were the things with because you remember my brain had no reality, no information of what was really going on. So it's trying to pull from what my reality was and figure what the F out was missing. And all my brain could see was that he wasn't showing up. He wasn't helping with kids. I was being alone in it. Da, 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 da. So I was just hounding him with all these things that I need him to do. Then you have boom, the reality collapse. And now, oh, what the hell is really going on? And I think this is where this myth comes in is I'm going to do all the things that you've been hounding me our whole marriage to do. So why isn't that enough? And I
Mm.
the reality fragmentation and collapse is the missing piece out of this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, what men always say is like, when will it ever be enough? And why is the target always moving? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You just gave her more information and she just saw more of what was really going on. So guess what? She wants more. She needs more. You need to give her something more and different. That all that stuff was relational stuff and we're at ground zero and doing individual stuff. So, anyways.
One last thing, Luke, when you were talking about at some point you said they feel like sex is a need.
Mm,
And I just want to highlight, I don't want to pass this because we're all on the same page of this, but I want to make sure our listeners are on the same page of this is sex is not a need. Nobody is going to die if they don't have sex. If it is an addiction, the addict brain will feel like it will die if it doesn't have sex. While that is a very integral, sexuality is a very integral part of who we are. And it definitely can be this beautiful bonding part of a relationship. Nobody is going to die if they don't have sex. And that's an uncomfortable truth, especially for those who have addictions. And I've said this on the podcast before, but I remember, Luke, when you called me probably 6 months the journey, like dumbstruck, because you're like, oh my gosh, Alana, I think I'm addicted to sex. Like, I think it's a need. And I was like, "Are you kidding? Like, you think?" Like, for me, that was so like, yeah. And for you, I remember that was so, like, shocking, and this was months into working with your therapist.
Yeah. And it was
It finally, like, clicked.
and it was liberating and painful at the same time,
mm,
because it wasn't somebody else saying it anymore. It was me going, "This is my truth."
mm,
And it meant a lot, and we had to get there. So that's where I think about, okay, sex isn't a need, and I wanna invite you to just explore that. Because I would have said at the very beginning in denial, "Yeah, I know. Of course it's not. I'm not gonna die." But I would not have explored that. I would have not have given that, "Oh, that is actually how I see it."
I know we always start with things like disclaimers, but these topics that we brought up today, especially anytime we talk about sex, sexuality, or intimacy, can bring up so much more. So I just take care of yourself, take time and notice what's been activated, where you're at, do some grounding work, take whatever did activate you back to your coach or therapist and do some work through it. And this is so helpful. Luke, when you come and you just talk about your experience and talk about the experience of the men you work with, it is always such a gift to our listeners because a lot of them don't get to get in the head of their partner and know what's happening and don't get that inside view. So just thank you for that vulnerability and giving us that inside view.
Yeah.
And listeners, grounding, taking care of yourself, be gentle. And we will do our part two next week. So, as always, thank you for hanging out with us. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
In today's discussion on the myths surrounding sexual betrayal, I want to leave you with a thought on personal healing and transformation. For many who have betrayed, the journey towards genuine recovery involves more than just understanding and stopping the harmful behaviors, a lot like we're talking about today and in the next two episodes. It requires that deep dive into the emotional and psychological roots of these actions. This is where somatic work like brain spotting becomes invaluable. Brain spotting is a therapeutic method that allows you to access, process, and release stored trauma and emotional pain from the body. This is about getting under the hood of your emotional world, so to speak, helping you confront and heal from the wounds that drive these destructive behaviors. If you're feeling stuck in your healing journey, if traditional talk therapy haven't fully addressed your feelings of guilt, shame or anger, or if you find yourself repeating patterns that you don't understand, then brain spotting might be the next step for you. It's designed for those ready to face their deeper emotional triggers and genuinely transform from within. Remember, healing is not just about stopping that behavior, but understanding and healing the parts of you that fuel these actions. If you're ready to explore this transformative approach, consider reaching out, going to chooserecoveryservices.com and find those that are trained in brain spotting. Your path to recovery is deeply personal, and somatic work can be a profound step towards not just understanding yourself, but truly changing your life. As always, continue to choose healing, to choose recovery, and to choose you. Take care, everybody.
I'm going to guess that healing from betrayal was something that you never thought you'd have to deal with or hoped you never have to deal with. And doing this type of work is the hardest emotional work you may ever have to do. And you don't have to do it alone. We have coaches and therapists in our Choose Healing groups to help lead you and guide you forward, who have not only learned the tools and resources to help you get to that healing and freedom and peace again, but have walked that path themselves. And in those groups, you're going to find other women who understand your pain, who can say that, me too, and who can give you that support, not just in your weekly group meetings, but that connection between meetings. I encourage you to take that brave step forward, to be vulnerable. It is not easy, but the reward of putting in the work, putting that one step forward as you choose healing and you choose recovery and you choose you, you will be able to move forward and heal.